Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Heinrich had asked Mr. Smith a question regarding if we create administrative or regulatory certainty in the time frame for approvals, that wouldn't we expect more applications? And Mr. Smith didn't want to opine, but I'd like to ask the other panelists whether you think, in very brief answers please, whether you think that there will be more applications if we create certainty, as this bill does.
I don't believe the number of applications is going to be affected by the timeline. It's going to be affected by companies that believe they were going to be able to get the financing, be able to line up customers. Again, these are very long-term, very expensive propositions. So I think those that are moving forward, knowing that there is some certainty at the end after a very long, extensive, but a predictable process at FERC. And by the way, during that entire FERC process, DOE is one of the cooperating agencies, so they're part of that effort as well.
Just for clarification, it sounds as though the FERC process is a much longer process than what DOE has to do once FERC approves.
Yes, it is a longer process, again, but DOE is part of that process. And to DOE's credit, during this entire time, not on a case-by-case basis, but they've been engaged in the studies that have been raised several times here with NERA to look at the broader national interest, the economic impact, and those are ongoing. So that's why our feeling is, having gotten through the FERC process, they've got the basic, they've got the foundational items they need at that point to then, in a very timely and specific way, make a determination.
And yet, okay, so I think the rest of you will, you agree that it's the FERC process that's really the sort of the big question mark. And so you wouldn't expect additional or increased applications as a result of this bill. And yet, I don't want to open a can of worms, but are you okay with the FERC process?
Again, I'll speak for our, for ANGA. We believe that the end for the companies that we've worked with, as I said, it is it is an expensive, it is a comprehensive process, but it's a predictable process. Okay. It's one they're familiar with, and so there have not been complaints about the FERC process.
Thank you. Let's move on. I do have one note of caution, though, about exporting natural gas, because it has to do with our ability to predict what is going to happen. After all, about 10 years ago, we thought we would actually be importing natural gas, so it gives me pause. And also a state like Hawaii, where we're looking to import liquid natural gas, I would love for the industry to help us figure out how we can do that and meet domestic needs in a cost a reasonable way, but that's not for this hearing. I understand that the extraction of gas does create a byproduct of methane, and that there are methane leaks, and methane is an extremely potent greenhouse gas that contributes to climate change. So I would like to ask this of Mr. Durbin. Assuming that LNG exports increase and therefore there will be more extraction activity, will there be or are there efforts by gas producers to reduce methane gas emissions during the production process? Thank
you, Senator. I'm glad you asked the question because the answer is an emphatic yes. And let me tell you what's already happened. If you just look at EPA's own data, so there's nothing from the industry, on methane emissions from natural gas producers. If you go from 2006, which was kind of a peak, to the emissions we saw in 2012, okay, the reduction of methane just from natural gas producers was 39.5%. Now, the dates are important here. 2006 was before the shale gas revolution. So in those 6 years, we've added thousands of wells. We've increased production by over 25% during that time. Yet methane emissions from natural gas production have been reduced by 39.5%. And that's going to continue, because it is in our interest to capture the methane. Methane is natural gas. That's what we're wanting to sell. It's also just the continued improvements in efficiency and innovation and technology in the industry that have us today where the most productive natural gas well in the country in northern Pennsylvania is producing 30 MCF a day. 10 years ago, the most productive well in the United States produced only 5. So the numbers are just for relative scale. We are producing a heck of a lot more gas, and at the same time, methane emissions are plummeting within our industry.
So I take it that you would not be in favor of EPA regulating methane emissions from this activity.
Well, to be clear, it is regulated by EPA under the current NSPS through volatile organic compounds. So what we say is the current regulations, you know, we're having all these reductions under current regulations. I would argue that EPA does not need another new regulation.
Thank you. I think my time is up.
Thank you. And